Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Monday, May 22nd, 2017 Eden Prairie Planning Commission meeting to order. Would everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. First item on the agenda tonight is our approval of the agenda. Does anybody have some comments? If not, I do. On page 3, I'm sorry, this is the agenda. I'm sorry, I was going to make some adjustments to the minutes. Let's do the agenda first. Agenda.
Approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Any opposed? Nope. Carries. Now let's go to the minutes. We're looking for comments on the Planning Commission meeting held Monday, May 8th, 2017. On the minutes. Does anybody have comments on the minutes? I would like to make some comments myself. On page 3 of the minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th paragraph down. Just a few typos. That first line, it says, Farr asked about Riverview Road. ROW should be right of way. In the second sentence, third line, it says in the preliminary plat there in, no, it should be there are no connecting utilities. And then the second to the last sentence, the applicant spell his name right instead of Mr. Blank, I believe it was Mr. Blake. That's all for me. Anybody else have comments on the?
You want to do it?
I'd like to mention one other change too. The next line under there, where it says Freiberg said he was previously on the Heritage Preservation, it says committee, it should be commission.
Thank you. Anybody else? Would anybody like to make a motion with the amendments stated?
Move to approve the agenda as proposed amended.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda passes as amended. I'm sorry, the minutes. I keep getting those two confused. I'm glad we're past the agenda and the minutes now. Moving on. We have no informational meetings, no public meetings. We have a public hearing tonight for a code amendment related to community centers. Julie, can you take us through the request?
I'd be happy to. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, before you this evening is a request to amend the zoning ordinance to specifically define community centers as well as locate them or propose to locate them as a permitted use within the public zoning district. As this commission has talked about previously, prior to 2011, the zoning ordinance included the terminology public facilities, which was allowed as a permitted use in all zoning districts, and it allowed public facilities such as schools and community centers, other things of that sort. Now that staff has become aware of the fact that after 2011 there was a code amendment that eliminated the term public facilities and replaced it with the term public infrastructure, which was much more narrowly defined, thereby missing, if you will, such uses such as schools and community centers. We have come back with a couple of text amendments. You recently reviewed one for schools, and we are back today with a definition for community centers as provided in your staff report. That definition is based on local, regional, and national research as to how other communities define them. Staff did look at that research, vetted it through an internal review process, including multiple divisions and departments, and has arrived at the language that is before you this evening. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, but staff is recommending approval of the amendment as it is reviewed in your packet this evening.
Julie, I have a question.
Sure.
broadening the definition of the community center, does that mean the city incurs any differences or changes in liability? Because you're broadening the number of structures, the number of venues, the number of facilities.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, currently the public community center that is operated by the city would technically be a non-conforming use because there is nothing in code that defines it. So this amendment is intended to fix that situation. The city attorney has reviewed this language and has worked with staff as a part of this text amendment as well. So there was no discussion about additional liability or concern about that.
Commissioner Whitkey?
I've got a community center as proposed, defined, underlined, includes a lot of things, but it does not include private school, public school, or place of worship. And then we, later on in 1135, lump places of worship in with the aforementioned. Is there a concern on the legalese between the two? Specifically omitting in the definition of community center and then adding it in the purposes?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the definition of community center is crafted the way in which it is and specifically calls out schools and places of worship because those are defined elsewhere specifically in the code. So in the case where there might be some ambiguity between those uses, there's a reason to go back to the definitions as provided. So the public district lists as permitted uses, if this were to be approved, community centers, and it already lists public and private schools as permitted uses as well as places of worship. So it's intended to provide more direction to the users of our zoning ordinance, those people that are reading it, and also to help staff as well when there are questions as to a specific use is proposed and the user communicates to staff what is going to happen in that use. We have the ability to then to look back at an array of definitions to figure out where the best fit is.
Julie, can I ask about one question? It looks like these changes are all additive, and I was wondering if anything needed to be retractive in the ordinance. Under the regular commercial districts, there's some language talking about providing space for community facilities and institutions that appropriately may be located in commercial areas. Does that phrase community facilities bother us in any way, shape, or form under the commercial district?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, at this point, I would say no, we're not concerned about that because the purposes of the commercial district are clearly stated in the zoning ordinance, and those are distinct from the purposes of the public district.
Okay. All right, thank you. Just as a matter of housekeeping, let's make sure that everybody knows this is a public hearing, and while our audience may be a little thin out here physically, let me just open it up in case there is anybody from the audience that wants to speak. Please do. Seeing none, let's just continue on with commissioner comments then.
Julie, I got one question, if I may ask, please. What are the immediate surrounding communities? How are they defining it? I noticed that staff, completed regional and national search for definitions, and you're saying most don't. What are they doing if they're not having this type of definition?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in cases where communities don't have a specific definition, my best professional guess is that they are making an interpretation based on the terminologies and definitions and permitted uses that are within their code. So it may not be an exact fit within the permitted uses that are listed in a zoning district or an exact match to a definition, but there are interpretations likely that are made.
Understood. Thank you.
Julie, one more question on the types of facilities. Missing from the list was libraries, I noticed, and the only place I saw libraries was in our new town center district. Do those warrant specific inclusion, or we have a Hennepin County Library, and I sense that's still a community asset.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so when the library opened, and I don't know the year right off the top of my head, but it was prior to this code change in 2011, so it would have gone in as a permitted use under the term public facility. So we are trying to fix all of these situations as time permits. So that is another one that, you know, may come forward for your review at some point in the future to specifically identify libraries as a permitted use within the appropriate zoning district.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask another question, I'm just looking at the current code, and we've got permitted uses and the proposed additions, underlined additions, include all lettered permitted uses except for antennas and towers in public school. Now, antennas and towers, I'm figuring, would be under the guise of public facilities. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, towers and antennas are specifically regulated under the Telecom Act from 1996. So you will find towers and antennas listed in every zoning district as a permitted use consistent with federal regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions? Okay,
I move
Very
to
good.
close the public hearing.
Second.
we have a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'd move to recommend approval to amend City Code Chapter 11 related to the community center definition and permitted use based on the information included in staff report dated May 19th, 2017.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item is the planner's report. I don't know if we have a planner's report, Julie?
Nothing this evening, sir.
Okay, members' reports. Anybody have a member's report?
Just like to say congratulations to the Planning Commission taking full steam ahead on the banquet and winning the Jeopardy.
Duly noted. And our fearless leader, our chairman, Chairman Piper, who led the charge, deserves all the credit. So we extend a warm greeting to him wherever he may be this evening. Any continuing business? New business? May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion for adjournment and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Planning Commission meeting is now over. Thank you.